Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Podcast Digest. This is Dan Lizette. This is episode 135. Very excited to tell you about this week's show. It is a great one, but before we do, let me just take a quick moment, thank a few very special people. Of course, first, I'm talking about all you awesome folks over on Patreon, supporting the Podcast Digest for as little as $1 a month. I greatly appreciate your continued support, and there is, of course, a link in the show notes if you'd like to join that party. Also, folks, want to take a moment and thank the wonderful show sponsor this week. My friends over at Podbean are back once again. If you go to podbean.com/TPD, you'll learn more about all their awesome podcast hosting and monetization opportunities. It's the easiest way to start podcasting, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Podbean in just a little bit. So let's get to this week's show. It's 135, and it is a great one. Really interesting conversation. So there is a new show that came out, and I was immediately intrigued by the concept. It's called The Play's the Thing, and what they do is they take actual stage productions of shows and convert them or record them or produce them in a way that is audio-centric first. And this group, it's called the L.A. Theater Works. It's the producing director is my guest this week, Susan Loewenberg. And as I got into my research with them and my conversation with Susan, come to find out L.A. Theater Works has been around forever, been doing this forever in all kinds of different medium, and they've traveled and they've used this production process for some awesome things. I don't want to give too much away from the conversation, but I think your eyes are going to be open to all that is the world of L.A. Theater Works. It's very impressive. I do want to make one quick mention, though, before we jump into the conversation. There was some challenges on audio quality on Susan's side of the recording. We both did our best and started and stopped once or twice to kind of clean up things as best we can. But she was in an environment with a lot of background noise, and you will hear that, some sirens and vehicles and things of that nature. But I did my best on this end to make it as good as possible. I think it's totally listenable, but I just wanted to mention that up front, that you will hear a little bit more ambient noise than you might want to typically hear. So, but either way, the conversation is awesome, and I'm telling you right now, I've got a ton of things to listen to now. The Play's the Thing is what you need to subscribe to. It's pretty awesome. So, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Susan Loewenberg from L.A. Theater Works and The Play's the Thing. Hello, folks. Welcome back. As I mentioned up front, my guest this week of a very different kind of podcast and maybe something you haven't heard before in the general podcasting space, but I think you're going to love. The name of the show is called The Play's the Thing, and my guest this week is not only the host of that show, but also the producing director for all of L.A. Theater Works. So Susan Loewenberg, welcome to the Podcast Digest.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. So much to talk about, and I'm really anxious to kind of let folks know a little bit about this. First of all, I need to admit my ignorance up front. When The Play's the Thing was launched by Wondery, that was the very first time I heard about this or L.A. Theater Works, so I need to admit that up front, and now I feel like I've been missing out for a very long time. So
You definitely have, but it's never too late, right?
And why I wanted to talk to you, because I don't want anyone else to continue to go on missing as I've been. But before we jump into that, I always like to open my shows with this kind of question, is to let folks know a little bit about yourself personally. Maybe even before L.A. Theater Works. What was a young Susan doing and aspiring to way back when?
Well, I actually was an actress, believe it or not, before I joined a group of friends and formed L.A. Theater Works, which at that time, which was in the early 70s, and at that time it was called Artists in Prison. But up till that time, I had been a child actress, and I finally quit acting when I was on a shoot in San Diego. I was actually pregnant with my second child, and we had a 2-day shoot, and I kept saying to them, but I'm pregnant. But, once you tell somebody there's an obstacle, they want it even more, right? They want to do it even more. And they said, oh, it's okay that you're pregnant. Anyway, so I go down to San Diego for this shoot. It was a milk commercial. And then the second day we're going back to L.A. We were stopped to eat on the way and so on. And middle of the night, I was like sicker than I've ever been in my whole life. I had gotten food poisoning. My husband was ready to take me to the hospital. And by 6:30 in the morning, when the AD called me, I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to do the second day of the shoot. And it turned out I was okay enough to go in. I remember I laid down on a bed, and when I had to do my little bit, I would get up and go back. And that was a sign to me that it was time for my acting career to be over.
That's a strong sign, yes.
That was a strong sign.
So what was the idea originally for LA Theater Works? I know you said that, and I'd read this on the About page, and of course, folks, links in the show notes as always, that LA Theater Works didn't start out with that. It had a different goal originally.
Yeah, originally we were a group of theater artists. We were writers, directors, actors, designers, all had met through the Mark Taper Forum because we were all doing various projects there. And one of the young director of the sort of new plays program, Bobby Greenwald, said, I'd like to start working in prisons. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. Little did I know. And we ended up doing a workshop together in the county jail. And again, I seem to always be pregnant in these stories, but I was about 6 months pregnant. And we were doing theater games and acting improvisation workshops with the inmates. And it was really interesting. And we thought, And so we sort of informally started to do this, working first at the county jail. And then somebody said, well, if you make it a nonprofit organization, you can get grants. A, I didn't know what a nonprofit organization was, and B, I had no idea what grants were. But long story short, I kind of agreed to head this up. And within a couple of years, we were incorporated as a nonprofit. We'd gotten our first grant from the California Arts Council, and we'd started to make a name for ourselves, using theater as a way of working with people who were incarcerated. In a positive way. And then we started a project with the Federal Bureau of Prisons at Terminal Island Federal Prison. We began to do plays that we actually exported. First, we got permission to bring the public into the auditorium at Terminal Island to see some of these works. And then eventually we even got inmates furloughed for every night they would go out and play at like the John Anson Ford Theater, which was a little theater that the Music Center controlled at that time, or we even went to UCLA once and performed, and then they would go back at night. So it became a very well-known project, and we were in state institutions, we were in federal institutions, and eventually we began to work and devise plays with people in the community, and eventually we got into professional theater production, and we were doing plays, productions in Los Angeles, and specializing in new work, and changed our name to LA Theater Works, and made a name for ourselves as live theater producers, doing adventurous new work. And then in 1985, we had an opportunity to work with a group of 35 very famous actors, all of whom were in Hollywood doing film and television, but all of them had theater backgrounds. And the people like Richard Dreyfuss, Julie Harris, Marsha Mason, Jo Beth Williams, Helen Hunt, John Lithgow. And we began to form a theater company. And the idea at first was to have a big theater in Los Angeles. And then it evolved into something else. And Richard Dreyfuss one day said, I've always wanted to work on the radio. And I said, okay, I'll call this woman I know, Ruth Hirschman, at KCRW. I called her up. She thought it was a great idea. We decided to do a big project. And we made a decision to record Sinclair Lewis's great novel, Babbitt. And my one condition was that all 35 members of this group that we had formed of famous actors participate. Ed Asner played Babbitt. And I remember Amy Irving had a major role. John Lithgow had a major role. And all the actors divided up the narration, and every time there was a character, it would be played by the same actor. And we released it as a 14-hour broadcast on Thanksgiving Day. Ruth Seymour aired it on KCRW Thanksgiving Day, all 14 hours, and it was an enormous hit. The BBC heard about us. They contacted us, asked us if they could pay for everything, send their two best radio producer directors, and we recorded The Crucible and Are You Now or Have You Ever Been? And I have to say The Crucible remains to this day to be our biggest seller. So that started us off, and we were off and running.
And you said this was in and around 85?
Yeah, around 85. And so we stopped really doing conventional theater and just did recorded theater.
At that point, Susan, in time, take folks back to sort of the concept of audio in theater. I'm sure that prior to that, plays were recorded in some way, shape, or form, but
yes.
but not like this, right? In terms of large scale with professional actors and with the intent to distribute audio first. Is that a fair statement?
Well, no, it's a little more complicated than that. There were some attempts to do it, and there were some pretty good ones. I remember Jose Quintero had a project where he did a group of Eugene O'Neill plays. And, of course, you know the BBC in England, there's this huge tradition of theater on the radio. I mean, it's enormous.
I think I was referring more to the U.S. when I said that.
But in the U.S., there had been a few attempts, and they had sort of petered out after a while. So our first idea was that we were recording these plays and airing them on KCRW. We didn't have it wasn't a regular program. It was when we got a show, when we did a recording, Ruth Seymour would air it on KCRW. But the idea of audio publishing, of actually selling these recordings, came later. It evolved. The radio show became more popular. We started to air it on a few other stations. I remember NPR for a while aired a group of shows nationally, but we didn't really have a regular, it wasn't like a nationwide broadcast. And in 2002, we went to blanking on it, another radio station here in Los Angeles, and we had a regular show. It was a weekly show. And then we decided we would try to interest stations around the country. And so we have about 60, 70 stations all over the United States that have been airing our program for many years, once a week. It's a weekly show. Once we started that, we then got the thought, perhaps we should have an audio publishing division. And we decided to give it a go. We issued a catalog, sent it to libraries and other mailing lists that we had acquired all over the country, and we got a very good return. And so we started selling cassettes. And this was in the 80s. And then, of course, over the years, cassettes were no longer viable. We were selling CDs. And then when the digital revolution happened, we then had to go back and convince rather leery authors that we needed the digital rights. And people were very, very nervous about it. I don't know if you remember this, but there was this whole notion that people would steal things if it was digital. And there was a lot of resistance. But we worked our way through it. And as I said to somebody, I know people are going to steal music. They're not going to steal a play. They're just not. I wish they would, but they're not going to. And of course, we've never had a play stolen. But it was an arduous process to get to explain it to people, to give people confidence that their work would not be um, you know, sold illegally and so on. But we explained that we had very good controls in place. And so we started, we moved from, and now I think, really when I look at our sales, our CD sales, of course, are getting smaller and smaller, and our digital sales are getting larger and larger. So that was really the evolution of the way we've been trying to get the work out there. And of course, we sell all over the world. We have about 25 distributors, including iTunes, Amazon. I mean, everyone you can name. We have our databases with universities. We have a whole project where we have all our plays on a database that's indexed for content, and that's sold to higher education.
I'm intrigued, Susan, by some of the time you've gone over there, and we're going to get to the current show, I promise. But there's a few elements in those early days I'm really curious about. You mentioned at one point for the I believe you said it was for the Crucible in '85. How many? Actually, I believe it was the show before that. With how many different actors that you guys were able to sort of get to come on board and to participate. And you mentioned that, and I've gone through the About page as well as some of the videos that you guys have put out on YouTube. And to say this is a who's who is probably an understatement. It seems to me, almost every significant actor and actress in some way over these last couple decades has at least dipped their toe, if not much more than that, through your doors. And I'm just curious, sort of, what's the process like to approach some of these individuals that may have a theater background for sure, and I know a lot of actors have time in the theater, but this is a little bit different. So what's that conversation like in terms of casting and recruiting some of these great talents?
Well, we had an advantage because when we started this project, we already had a group of 35 famous actors who had come to us saying they wanted to do theater in Los Angeles. And so we had that nucleus. And then initially, I would say to Dreyfus or ask Jo Beth Williams or something, I'd really like X to come to do something. Do you know him or her? And so we kind of were able to do it that way. And of course, we worked with agents and managers. And I think the attraction for well-known actors and all good working actors is that, people do films and they do television, and they always say they want to do theater, but a lot of, in many instances, they don't have 8, 12, 15, 20 weeks to do even a limited run and rehearsal. Right. But what happens in this, what happens in this process is it's a 1 week, very, very intensive process. And you're able to really use those muscles that may be, have not been used in a while because you've been doing a television series for 2 years, that you can really exercise those muscles. You can get to work with other wonderful actors who are at your level. And it is amazing what you can do in a week if you don't have to worry about sets and costumes and blocking and lighting. It's just you and the text. And it is a very intensive process. And it's amazing. It is always the same. It is a very steep upward trajectory. We rehearse very intently for 3 days, very intensive. And then we record the show 5 times over a period of 4 days. And each time there is a monumental leap forward. And people really focus in and work very, very hard. And you have to be at the top of your game to do it. I mean, it's challenging, it's exhilarating, and you end up with a superb product in a very efficient manner.
Let's talk about the process a little bit, because when I first started to hear the play's the thing, winding closer and closer to the actual most recent podcast ever here, the first story, first play.
Yes.
I guess you could say season isn't the right thing because you guys are kind of rolling from play to play. Becky Shaw. I got the impression, again, I was just landing on the Plays the Thing and LA Theater Works at this point, and I started listening to it, and I'm like, this almost sounds like they're mic'd up stage actors in front of an audience. Now,
Well,
is that what we heard, or is that something done in post? What's sort of the process for actually laying all this down?
well, you are correct. We're doing it in front of the audience, just like an old-fashioned radio show. When we started the project, I thought to myself, well, how are we going to pay for this? If we went into it, I just knew that I was never going to get the funding. We're a nonprofit organization. For nobody was going to fund us to just record these plays in the studio. So then I thought, well, maybe we could get the audience to pay for it. And Ed Asner, this was in 1989, had a friend who was staying in a newly opened hotel in Santa Monica called the Guest Quarters Suite Hotel. And he kept driving me crazy. Ed kept saying, you've got to meet this guy, you've got to meet this guy. I said, why do I want to meet him? So anyway, finally, I said, Ed, I can't stand it anymore. I'm going to go meet this guy. So I did. And it turned out that it was a newly opened hotel. And the idea, it sort of came to me as I talked to the marketing manager and the general manager of the hotel, that they wanted a way to put their hotel on the map. And I thought, well, why don't we record plays in front of an audience? And so I said, okay, we'll try it, And we all thought, this is crazy, but we'll try it. Well, we announced the first play, and I think it was a Moliere play with Jo Beth Williams, and I can't remember who else. And we sold it out. And we thought, and so we put together a 6-play season. I got some funding from a foundation. I think it was the James Irvine Foundation. And it just took off like wildfire. The hotel was thrilled. The general manager was a very endearing guy. He used to give out chocolate chip cookies to the audience. And there was, people had to wait in line because this was a ballroom with seats. It wasn't reserved seating. But there was a kind of camaraderie around all of this. The actors loved it. And the series just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Till at one point, we were doing 14 shows a year. I think we started out doing two recordings each, then 3 recordings, then we went to 4 recordings of a play. And we were there for 10 years. We put the hotel on the map. Right. And we made did a ton of work. And then Guest Quarters, which then became Doubletree, had opened a hotel in Chicago and one in the Boston area. So we went to Boston and Chicago. So for that 10, 11-year period between 89 and 99, we were probably making 30 shows a year, 35 shows a year, and building our library. That's before we started selling. We were really focused on creating content. And we were doing it all over the country. We went to Washington. We did a project with the Washington Theaters called Washington Theaters on the Air with the Voice of America and the Smithsonian. And we recorded in the Voice of America auditorium. The Smithsonian brought the audience to us. And we worked with all the leading theaters in Washington, D.C., just the way we did in Chicago with all the leading Chicago theaters, Steppenwolf, Goodman, all the great theaters, Arena Stage in Washington, ART in Boston. And we would also bring a couple of our well-known actors each time to perform with the cast. And we used some of the artistic directors of the theaters in the towns we were going to. So it was a very exciting, stimulating period, but it was before we got involved in audio publishing and all the other activities we could do.
When everything took off from there. And pardon the interruption, folks. Let me take just a quick moment to tell you about this week's show sponsor. It's my friends at Podbean. Podcast hosting and monetization is their game, and they offer so many different things. It's literally the easiest way to start podcasting. If you are considering starting your own show, or maybe you've got a show and want to explore what a different host may be able to offer to you, Podbean should be on your short list. They've got all the website tools you need. Of course, you're going to be able to set up a website for your show. You're going to be able to share to all the social networks with some awesome embeddable players when you publish a new episode. If you've already got your own website, Podbean's got you taken care of there as well. They can fully integrate into your own website. All the RSS and iTunes support you need to either launch or migrate your show from another host, Podbean's got you taken care of there. If you want to tell folks, hey, just download my app, that's a super easy thing to do that everybody understands. They support the popular mobile apps for both Android and iOS. You'll join their online directory, and they promote shows all the time. If you go check out their website, you'll see what I'm talking about. And of course, all the podcast statistics you would ever possibly need. Podbean's got you covered. Dig deep, look at each day's, where they come from, so on and so forth. Podbean's got all that information for you if you end up hosting with them. And if you host with them, you can really explore kind of next level type things. Things like designating episodes as premium and charging a small fee for those individual episodes, or participating in their advertising platform. Podcasters talk all the time about potentially getting an advertiser. Well, Podbean has a full built-out platform designed just for that exact reason, as well as a patron program where individual listeners can support you directly with a recurring donation. Podbean has that built out as well. All of that and more. If you go to podbean.com/TPD, it'll tell them that you came from the Podcast Digest, and it'll also give you an opportunity to dig even further into all of Podbean's offerings. And you'll get your first month for free if you sign up using that special URL, podbean.com/TPD. My thoughts, my thanks to Podbean for their continued support of the Podcast Digest. All right, and you mentioned that you were getting into a lot of the audio production stuff, Susan, and there was all kinds of different things. I think you touched on it earlier, but I'm curious to learn more about it. The use in schools. You mentioned that, I think I read somewhere, every state has at least some subset of professors or teachers using this in school, and that there's a lot of benefit the students are getting from your works.
It's interesting that, even today I'm still sending CDs because all of the schools do not have the capability to send things digitally, which is unfortunate, and I think that'll change. It's gradually changing, of course, but there are many schools that still need CDs, so we do that. And the other thing is that we have these wonderful teaching tools. For example, some of our apps, we've recorded a number of Shakespeare plays, but we do it with American actors using good, what we call mid-Atlantic speech. And they're marvelous recordings, and the text is synced to the audio. So the kids can read the text and hear the play in their ear. They can stop when there's a word or something they don't understand, and they'll come up with a definition. Right. So it really brings Shakespeare alive. It's so much, kids will say, oh my, this is so much better than just reading it. Reading is boring. And we've done that we have a series called the Relativity Series. We have a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and we record plays that have scientific themes. These are plays that have been commissioned by other regional theaters around the country. And they have scientific themes, and they're marvelous pieces. And we also have text synced to the audio with those. And it's a marvelous way to introduce kids to science. Science teachers use them. English teachers use them. Sometimes they'll team teach. We have a brilliant recording called The Great Tennessee Monkey Trial, which is not Inherit the Wind. It's based on the actual 1925 trial transcripts of the Scopes trial. And it is such a brilliant piece, and it's a way for teachers to teach evolution. And particularly when we first released it, there was a lot of controversy, and there still is, about teaching evolution in the public schools. And this was a great way for teachers to teach evolution and not running afoul of some of the issues around evolutionary theory.
It's just tremendous. I mean, it seems like there's so many different masters that you guys are able to serve through what you do there, be that, audio entertainment or through schools or for museums or all of it. It just seems like there's so many different groups that can gain so much from what you and LA Theater Works are able to put together for them. It's wildly impressive.
Well, we also have a database for higher education where all the plays are indexed for content. So if you're a professor of physics and you want to teach something about ethics, you can query the database, and it will give you a play or scenes within plays that are relevant to what you're doing. So that database is sold all over the world. And then the other thing is that we tour around the country every year, just like Garrison Keillor or This American Life. We tour our radio show around the country. But when we tour, it's more theatrical. Because when we're recording in L.A., and our object, we want the audience to have a good time, but our object is to get a great recording in a week. But when we tour, we have lights, we have projections, we have people don't use scripts, but there are microphones, and it feels like a theatricalized version of a radio show. In 2011, so we've been touring nationally for about 12 years. In 2011 and 2013, again, we went to China. And we brought our radio theater to China. And we created sort of a sensation because we brought a play about freedom of the press called Top Secret, The Battle for the Pentagon Papers, about the 12 hours in Ben Bradley's living room when the Washington Post had to decide to publish the papers after the New York Times had been enjoined. And it's a thrilling docudrama about freedom of the press, about the independence of the judiciary, all kind of controversial subjects in China. And we weren't sure we were going to get shut down.
I was going to say, how'd that go over in China?
Well, it was very interesting. We almost got shut down. When we got to Beijing University in 2011, we were on our way to selling out all 2,200 seats, and we were at about 1,500 seats, and suddenly the government said, you have to stop selling tickets and we're going to cancel. And we were on the phone all weekend, I remember, with the consulate and the embassy, and everybody was trying to help us. And anyway, they let us do it. They wouldn't let us have a post-play discussion, but they let us do the show, and it was great. And it was written up in the New York Times and the New Yorker and, the Washington Post and all over the world. And then we were invited back in 2013, and we played the National Theater. We became the first theater group to play the National Theater, which is the Big Egg. It's called the Egg at the edge of Tiananmen Square in Beijing. And that was very exciting. We toured to 5 different cities in China. Meanwhile, the Radio Beijing Network in 2011 contacted us. They were helping us publicize the show. And the manager said to me, would it be possible to air your radio program? And I said, absolutely. We would love that. We'll give you a show every week. She said, oh, no, we want it every day. So long story short, for the past 4 years, we have been on the radio every single day. They do Act 1 on a Monday, Act 2 on a Tuesday, and a new show on Wednesday, and so on throughout the week. They've just renewed our contract for another 4 years, and they have become our distributors in China. So
that's amazing. Is it translated for them, or are they receiving the English?
You see, when we toured China, our audiences were the dream audiences for people. In the theater, you're always fighting to get younger people to come to the theater. But here, everybody was 40 and under. And all people, young people who, spoke English with varying degrees of proficiency, but all wanting to improve their English and, more importantly, familiarize themselves with American culture. So I'll never forget the first night we got in 2011 when we arrived. We were playing the Shanghai Dramatic Arts Center in Shanghai, and I'm standing in the lobby, and it was such a tremendous, tremendous job to get this project going. And I thought to myself, I'm standing in the lobby. Is anybody going to show up?
Right.
The doors open, and hundreds of young people stream through the doors. It's the most exciting, amazing experience. And we did a week of shows there, sold out every night, and it was all young people. And everywhere we went, our audiences were young people. So they love to listen to the show because it helps them improve their English.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That is so cool.
Yeah. And now
I'll tell you.
Got a new project going. When we go, I'm going back to China. I'm going to bring another play. I think I'm going to bring Enron, which is a wonderful play about corporate corruption, which is of great interest in both China and the United States. But it's
I was going to say you're a great American ambassador. Pentagon Papers, Enron. You're just showing them the best of us.
Well, here's the thing. As one of the ambassadors, I said, he was very smart. He was the political officer. I said, are we going to get shut down before we even start? This was in 2011. He said, listen, there's plenty that's bad about Americanness. They'll love it. And that's true. If you can't come there and with a holier than thou attitude, here we are, wonderful. No. You have to show American democracy, warts and all. Very important. Because
I hope your playwrights are standing by there, Susan. In 2017, there could be lots of material.
Yes, there. Well, speaking of which, I did a commission last summer. I had an uncomfortable instinct that I would need to do something, and I commissioned David Rambo, who's a wonderful playwright, but also a very, very well-known television writer. He was one of the original writers on Empire, for example. I commissioned him to write a play about presidential judgment in a crisis. Who knew? It's debuting in May. Who knew it would become so relevant? And it's the story of Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it focuses on the tremendous challenge. Here was this young man, hadn't had too much experience. He's president of the United States, and he's faced with this incredible decision. And he's given, huge amounts of information, very technical, some of it, from all kinds of experts, from the Joint Chiefs, from George Bundy, from, everyone weighed in. And he was able to parse all that information. At the same time, he's playing a game of chicken with Khrushchev, a political set of issues. And he was able to come to the right decision. And the process, you see what it takes as a leader in that situation, what it takes to come out with the right decision. So I think it's going to be a disturbing play for watch. Yeah.
That opens a segue for me here, Susan. When I'm thinking about sort of fiction following reality type deal, it reminds me of a Wondery original, which is Terms. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to hear that, but that one was way too prescient as well, involving presidential politics. But you guys are obviously not necessarily a Wondery product. You guys are your own thing, but you are being supported by Wondery, I think is a fair statement.
Yes.
And I'm kind of with the plays, the thing. So take me to the idea. We've gone through a little bit all these different distribution vehicles that you guys have utilized to great extent, live production, so on and so forth. And then it would seem to me, I'd always a podcast would be perfect. And now LA Theater Works has one. Talk about the early days, maybe how this got started.
Well, we were introduced to Wondery by actually a member of our board. And we began talking about ideas of, ways we could work together. And eventually we came to the idea that, podcasting might be a very interesting way for us to work together. And they really put it together for us. And so it's been so far it's been terrific. I think that we are off to a very good start. We had two wonderful sponsors, Audible, which is, of course, one of our chief distributors of our work.
Right.
And through Audible iTunes. And then a product that I didn't really know, but it is so marvelous. It's called Blue Apron. And it turns out that our audio sales, this is the truth. This is not made up. It turns out that our audio sales director is a huge fan of Blue Apron. She's been using it forever and loves it. So when we did the first commercial, I said, I think we need a testimonial from Michelle because she is such a fan. And so that's been kind of fun, and the rest of us here at LA Theater Works are all now using Blue Apron.
Blue Apron is everywhere right now. And Blue Apron, folks, if you're listening, I'll be happy to have that conversation with you as well, for the record. And so you guys partner with Wondery, and what then do you choose with this huge back catalog of performances that you guys have? What was the decision-making process on what to feature first, the format? Is it one episode? Is it multi-episodes? How about all those decisions?
Yeah, we really had to make some decisions. What were we going to offer? And, one of the problems with terrestrial broadcasting, and this is so stupid, but, they will not allow certain kinds of subject matter or language when you broadcast. So we are often some of our best work, and certainly the contemporary work is full of language. But, this is literature. And there's, and I think the constraints are foolish, but that's the way it is. So we would have to bleep things, or there were sometimes plays, for example, a David Mamet play that you couldn't even broadcast because you'd be bleeping it so much it wouldn't be enjoyable to listen to. Now, when we do the audio publishing version, that's not a problem. Or when we're streaming it online, it's not a problem. But for the actual broadcast, we have been inhibited. So it was such a joy to be able to do these podcasts and pick our edgiest work. We wanted to go out with some of our edgiest work, and work that would appeal to maybe a younger population. We were interested in the first instance in attracting young women. And which is not to say that everybody else wasn't welcome to listen. Of course they were.
Well,
but
good.
we were we were focusing it really on, we really wanted to get our edgy work out there, that we were having a problem with in the broadcast media. So, and it's some of our best work. And of course, the writers, these younger writers that we have nurtured, I mean, it's, from a sales point of view, are new playwrights going to sell the way Molière or Oscar Wilde or Shaw or Shakespeare? No. But it's very important to get that work out there. And so this was a great opportunity to showcase new work.
And Becky Shaw is the first story folks will hear if they are jumping over and subscribing now. And I know you're doing that, folks. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was spectacular. And that one was performed live. Yes?
Yeah, me too. So, that we recorded in front of the audience. Did 5 recordings with some of our super favorite actors. Emily Bergel, Josh Stamberg, Matt Lesher. These are LATW regulars. They're all superb young actors, and Marcia Mason, who is priceless in this as well. And we had a great time doing it. I love the work too. I think it's hilarious. And I think she's just a superb young playwright. And so we were thrilled to be able to do that as our opener.
So I'm wondering, all those actors you're regularly working with, and maybe from other LA Theater Works staff in the podcast form, since that first play has rolled out, what's sort of been the reaction from everybody? How's everybody feeling about this new format?
You're talking about our audience or our staff?
Well, first from the group, and then the feedback from the public, but from the people who put this together.
I think the staff and our partners at Wondery are happy. I think people are happy with the reception. we've got a good group of listeners. I think we're on target in terms of the number of listeners they wanted to attract. And I think the other thing that's important is your retention rate. And I think our retention rate is excellent. So that's good. I was worried in the beginning because normally, when you're listening to a play is 90 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours, but it's somewhere in that range. And you're used to listening to it, in one shot or maybe 2 shots. So, but podcasting seems to have a kind of sweet spot at around 27, 28, 29 minutes, something like that, 30 minutes. So we had to divide the plays, we've had to divide them up, and we've tried to do it judiciously, 3 episodes or maybe 4, but no more than that. So it's asking people to, to listen and then to wait a few days, and then they get the rest of it, and then they get the end of it. But I think it's okay. And of course, some people are going to wait and download all the episodes so they can listen all at once.
Right.
They will do that. But so far, so good. I mean, we're pleased. I mean, it's early days, but we think that we're getting a very good audience. And as I said, it's clear that people are coming back.
Now, with the second play, we definitely struck the edgier tones that you talked about, sort of the play selection. And at the time of the recording, we're only 2 episodes in, but folks now can more than likely hear that whole thing. That is called Boy, right? What was the but this one, correct me if I'm wrong, was not recorded in front of a live audience?
That is correct. No, that is not correct. Boy was recorded... I can't remember if it was recorded in front of an audience or not.
I've only heard the first 2, so I could be wrong myself.
I think Boy was recorded in front of the audience, as I recall. It's a very challenging play, as you may know. It's a story, very tragic story. It's actually based on a real incident of a circumcision gone awry, and this family had twin boys. And the boy whose circumcision resulted in his losing his penis, they're in agony. They don't know what to do, and they consult a doctor they've heard about who specializes in transgender issues and other issues with regard to sexuality, and they decide to raise him as a girl. And the fallout from that decision is the subject of this play. And there is a happy ending, but it's an agonizing, it was an agonizing decision for this family. And the spirit of this young girl, who then realized she was a boy, is just a beautiful thing to watch. It's beautiful to watch the evolution of that, and it's a terrific piece. I'm very proud to have done that.
And obviously very relevant in today's day and age in terms of bringing certain discussions to the forefront. So, like I said, at the time of recording, there's only 2 out there. I'm anxiously awaiting the next one. I am current. I have a feeling I will be current for a long while. But I have a question, though. You mentioned sort of some of the monitoring that you and Wondery were maybe doing moving forward on sort of audience numbers and retention and how they may receive, stories broken into several parts. What about the idea that it's almost like if I were to watch HBO and just watch it all day, I'm going to see several movies go through on a particular day. I may not like every movie, and I might choose to change the channel. There's kind of that element with the plays, the thing, right? Because the first 4 weeks, there was Becky Shaw. Now you've got the next set of, I'm assuming, 4 weeks or so with Boy, and then you've got another one coming after that. Is that something you guys are watching closely as well?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you talking about retention or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think our retention rate is excellent. That's what we're looking at. Look, it's very early, but from what we can tell, it's a very fine retention rate, which is great. The next play we're doing is really, it's one of my favorite shows. I mean, they're all my favorite shows, but this was an amazing thing. And this is a writer that I adore, Stephen Adley Girgis. I've recorded 2 earlier plays, Jesus Hopped the A Train and Our Lady of 121st Street, which we did with Lawrence Fishburne. This play is called The Motherfucker with the Hat. And you can imagine you couldn't say the words, the motherfucker with the hat on podcast. But you can certainly do that in podcast. And play was on Broadway with Chris Rock, Bobby Cannavale, Annabella Shura, Elizabeth Rodriguez, and it is amazing because we got the entire cast to come and do this. It was such a thrill. I mean, I
think on your YouTube page, on your 40 years history, there's a brief clip from that, if memory serves.
Yeah. Yes. And so we had so much fun doing it. It is hilarious, and it's it's about this sort of hapless guy who's a drug user, but you can't help but love him. I mean, he's one of these people that keeps making terrible decisions. Played by Bobby Cannavale, as only Bobby can do, and Chris Rock is his counselor. He's got a counselor. And you can imagine Chris Rock as somebody's counselor. But it is so funny. And it's just a complete, I mean, the way Girgis writes, he writes over the top. Just absolutely over the top. And he writes with enormous humanity, but with tremendous humor. And in the case of Jesus Hop the A Train, it's actually quite a serious piece. But he's really got a sense of vitality that is extraordinary. So we had a tremendous time recording. It was lots of fun. One of the interesting challenges when you're recording a play with actors who haven't done it before is getting them to move from the theatrical performance mode to the radio mode. Because it's a fairly intimate experience when you're listening, you know? And I think as a listener, you want to feel to some extent, you know, they're playing just to you. It's as though you're peeking through a keyhole at people's lives, you know? You want that feeling. And the actors have to be able to know that the mic is their friend. And they've got to be right on that mic. They can't be turning to the side and relating to the other actors. They've got to be doing it straight out to the mic, and yet have all of that relationship right there with people, even though they're talking into a microphone. It's quite an interesting thing. It's fabulous to watch because you see this tremendous concentration. And, you know, while they have no use of, you know, there's nothing physical and visual that they can do. What they can do is use all kinds of nonverbal aspects of their voices. You know, as I love eating scenes because the way people eat says so much about the emotional tenor of what's going on, just as one example. And I always say to people, it's great to smile, but if the smile is not in your voice, nobody's going to know you're smiling. So the smile has to be in your voice. So it's training people who are used to performing in front of people, and that is the object. That's what they're going for, is entertaining those people with all of the physical accoutrement that they have. This is about their voices doing it all.
Right. I can't wait to hear the third play. I've been in love with the 1.5 that I've been privy to so far. I'm excited to hear what's next. Give folks an idea of what to expect, though. Are you guys going to be looking at seasons? There'll be a subset of plays, then a break, then more, or sort of what's the plan from here on out?
Well, the plan is to do this first group, see how we're received. So far, so good. And if everybody thinks it's worthwhile, we'll continue. We'll just do it. You know, plays, we may have different themes that we're interested in. We'd have a superb group of docudramas. Two of them I mentioned, the Great Tennessee Monkey Trial and, three actually, the New Commission, which is called Tug of War, about the Cuban Missile Crisis and Kennedy, and Top Secret, The Battle for the Pentagon Papers. So we've got a lot of pieces like that, which are really marvelous and speak to things that we're very concerned about right now.
I'll tell you what, and maybe this is one and the same in your mind, and maybe it very well may be, but I know a lot of podcasts nowadays are also doing live shows, and obviously you two, those two elements are right up LA Theater Works alley, and I would love to see you and your group start arriving at some of these podcast festivals and sort of recording a live episode and performance of an upcoming The Play's the Thing. It would be a sight to see.
That's definitely. We'd love to do that. We do that anyway.
Right. That's what I mean. It's kind of already there. It's just marrying them together.
Well, I'd love to play the Ace Hotel, which is such a vibrant, fantastic place to do things in Los Angeles, And they did a whole podcast. Radiotopia did a show at the Ace, and it was fantastic.
I think I recall. Not too long ago, right? They were out that way, yes. Well, Susan Loewenberg, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I honestly have about 10,000 more questions for you, but I want to be respectful of your time. I cannot wait to see what's coming up next. And I tell you what, there's links in the show notes, folks, and there are a ton of things out there to listen to from LA Theater Works. I got stuck on right before we hopped on the line, Susan, on PRX. PRX has got a page for you guys, and geez, 205 plays linked up on the PRX page right now, and I'm like, oh wow.
Yeah, and you can just go, if you want to know more about LA Theater Works, the best thing to do is go to our website, because all the many things we do are up there, and our entire catalog of 500 plays is up there. So it's latw.org.
That link's in the show notes, folks, as always, and as many links as I can find. I'm thoroughly impressed, and I have a feeling I'm going to have to go back and check some of these amazing things out. So thank you for opening my eyes and my ears, more importantly, to this world. I had no idea that was happening, and at least I feel better now knowing that I do know about it. So, Susan Loewenberg, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
And that'll do it for this week's show, folks. What'd you think? Episode 135 in the can. Susan Loewenberg from LA Theater Works and The Play's the Thing and so much more. What an interesting story. I literally could listen to Susan tell stories for a very long time. Her experience in doing what she does has just been amazing to me, and I'm really sort of intrigued by this life of audio production of Broadway style shows. It's really cool, and I really enjoyed talking to her. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please tell a friend, share the show, put it on your Facebook page, pin it to your profile on Twitter. Say it's your favorite podcast ever. Tell a friend, leave a review on iTunes. Anything. Spread the word of mouth. If anybody says, "Oh, I don't know where to start," if I wanted to, start listening to podcasts. Have them start here. They can learn a lot about a lot of different shows, and I like to think that I've got more than one or two good ones there for people to find out. So that'll do it for this week's show. My thanks once again to this week's show sponsor, my friends over at Podbean. If you go to podbean.com/TPD, you'll get your first month for free. If you're thinking about starting a show or looking for a new home for your podcast, you need to have Podbean on your short list. So my thanks again to Podbean. That'll do it for episode 135, folks, for the podcast digest. Until next week, my name is Dan Lazette.